Welcome to the Previously Rockhounding podcast, where we explore the world of rockhounding and lapidary from the ye olden days of the 1970s and 80s through the lens of vintage issues of Rock and Gem magazine.
This is episode 10. We're looking at Rock and Gem magazine from January 1977.
If you're a new listener here, the way this works is I read the issue, Sarah reads the issue, we don't discuss it at all, and we come together here on the podcast and discuss it.
If you're not a new listener, you might have noticed something this episode. You can hear me. We sound better.
We certainly do sound a lot better.
Did a little upgrading on our equipment, and turns out getting nice things is not the cheapest option. Not the cheapest thing you can buy. Produces better results. So, adding a new thing this episode, sponsorship.
This episode of the Previously Rockhounding podcast is sponsored by Gaia GPS. Gaia GPS is both an app and software that you can use on your computer, and it gives you access to all kinds of amazing data that you technically can find elsewhere for free, but what Gaia does an amazing job of is making it downloadable on your phone in stackable layers, such as you can get weather, public lands, private lands, access to all of your location pins, lay tracks, forest service maps, on and on. We use it all the time. And at this point, I really don't want to go back to not having Gaia, because it's very cool to be in the middle of nowhere and have pre-downloaded the whole area we went to explore and be like, are we on private land? Are we on public lands? From the perspective of somebody rockhounding, that is a critical step.
Yes, you can also record your tracks where you're going. So if you go to the same spot and you want to go back to your same hole or something, you're not, you can look at your previous tracks and go the same way or make sure you go a different way.
Absolutely. I mean, like
tons and tons of features.
We're really just scratching the surface with it here. One feature that is very cool that I didn't really ever expect when we started using Gaia like over a year ago was historic forest fire layer, which is pretty cool to be able to see, oh, hey, why is this area, like, it looks like some burnt trees. Oh, wait, you can look it up. It burned 7 years ago, which I just kind of think that's kind of neat, like, to have that data.
Yeah, I don't know where else you would find that.
Oh, I mean,
I'm sure it's somewhere.
I think it's on the interagency website,
yeah.
But like, talk about a not user-friendly website.
I mean, you can see that overlaid on a map of where you are right now, you know?
Yeah,
so.
no, like, what Gaia does really well is it takes all this stuff and just stacks it in nice layers.
Gaia GPS does have a free version, but the paid version is well worth it. It is not expensive compared to other similar map apps out there. It is normally, $39.99 for 1 year, and you get all of the maps for worldwide, but we have a special
discount link,
so if you want to save $8, $32 a year.
Yes,
$32 a year. That's a good deal.
Yeah, check them out.
Well worth it. Use the link in the show notes.
On with the show.
We probably went too long because we love Gaia so much.
I'm leaving that in.
We'll keep it shorter next time.
Well, speaking of ads,
yes.
No. Speaking of ads, this issue of Rock and Gem magazine, I did not see a whole bunch of ads that were very unique to this issue. I feel like I do a pretty good job of like really intensely looking at the ads, and I'm always looking for funny, interesting, unique things. And this one, I think we've covered like every single one before. So,
yeah, most of them were pretty similar, if not the same.
Did you have any ads that you wanted to mention?
There was a few. There was one it said, do it yourself. For US $25 gets you any one of these 3 items. And the 3 items, not items, but like 3 packages of things you could either get beads, which was like 10,000 wooden beads, 1,000 baroque beads, 600 round, 300 bone, 10,000 brass, 2,000 sandalwood, 300 beggar beads, which that adds up to a lot of beads for $25. Or it was like 4 silver necklaces plus 170 other necklaces. Or you could get cabs or gem balls, which I didn't know what a gem ball is.
I have no I have no idea what a gem ball
They said
would be.
it was like 2,000 agate cabs or gem balls. Maybe it's like a marble. Or plus 100 crosses, 50 bone carved animals, 50 bone or horn pendants. So then like all this stuff for $25. And it was straight from Bombay, India. It's like, it was different than being like, buy some rough rock.
I feel like a gem ball has to be a sphere. That's
I
what
said like a really small one because it was like you get a cab or a gem ball. Yeah. Seemed like quite a deal.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what 25 is, like $100 now.
Yeah, no.
That's not bad.
Yeah, I mean, you imagine if you were setting up at a flea market and you just had like a ton of that stuff. Like you could certainly make your money back for sure.
Yeah.
Do you have any other ads?
You have absolutely zero?
I have absolutely zero. Yeah, like I was really looking. I feel like that ad. I don't know if the one that you just mentioned I'd seen it before, but
I don't know if I had. Yeah.
okay.
There was an ad for, it said, men, women, make precious jewelry, big profit, home business. And it was like, write them for the secrets to making jewelry. And it's like,
In big profits.
yes. They're like, this necklace costs $80 in material, but sold for $500. And it's like, you can make so much money at your dining room table. We'll send you all the details in our book. And it's like, it didn't say you have to buy the equipment, but I feel like you had to buy some equipment. I'm guessing from them.
At some point, I really want to look at a modern Rock and Gem magazine. If there's like these crazy deals, it might be funny just to like buy some of them.
Yeah.
And be like, we're now setting up at a flea market.
They're like 20,000 beads for $100. I'd be like, that's a lot of beads.
They're all going to be like so small, like you need tweezers to put them on a string.
Yes.
Yeah.
A couple episodes ago, I mentioned an ad for arrowheads, and it was $5 for a dozen. This one had an ad for arrowheads that were $5 for 25, and it described the arrowheads as rare, authentic, perfect condition, unique gift, trade, frame, collect, resell. Just those words, like in a list. But I was like, what is a perfect condition arrowhead? An authentic and perfect condition. What is that?
That means somebody napped it like.
I guess it
like
didn't.
last
It
week.
didn't say like Indian arrowheads. It just said arrowheads. They got me.
Yeah, that's a freshly made one.
Yes.
I don't know if you
Rare.
Well,
Are they like
if you
rare?
if you took a rare material and made an arrowhead out of it, you napped it into an arrowhead, and it was of the correct size, proportions, and style that used to be used in, let's say, a specific area, wouldn't that be authentic? Couldn't you call that an authentic
Well,
replica? I don't know.
Authentic to what? Like, this is how Larry makes arrowheads. It's rare. How many people have a Larry arrowhead? Authentic.
Very true. You make a good point. I have no idea what those words mean. I feel like some of the ads, there's a little bit of word salad happening where you're just like, well, what precisely do they mean here?
Yes. Yes.
So,
Last one, there was an ad for the United Way, and it just said, "It's working thanks to you." The United Way.
that's nice of them to thank us.
What's working?
The United Way is working.
Like, working on what?
That's a very good question. Growing up, I remember like the United Way, like donation boxes that would be at like a register, and you could like put a quarter in it. And I don't exactly know what the United Way.
Yeah,
does.
I was like, what do they do? Like, diseases or like social issues?
That's a very good question.
Don't they do? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Are they still around?
I think they're still around. Pretty confident on that one.
That's probably it for ads.
Well, I'm going to speak about the editor's column, and Sarah's going to look up on her phone if the United Way still exists.
Sure.
So, the Glory Hole, which is the editor's column, in the November 1977 issue, they mentioned a trip to the Obsidian Dome in California, which this is still a place that you can go to the Obsidian Dome right now. Maybe you're on the way there right now as you listen to this. And they issued a correction, which I thought was kind of cool. So they published an incorrect geological date. They said that the obsidian there dated between 12,000 and 4,000 years in age, but someone from the Inyo National Forest reached out to the magazine and told them that the ages were more between 6,000 to 8,000 in age. And I find this to be really interesting because it seems increasingly rare that any publication today will issue a correction. A lot of things that are incorrect today in publications, both in like magazines and news, whatever, they will stealth at it and never actually admit that they did anything wrong, or hey, we made a mistake, or they do all kinds of sneaky things. So I thought it was kind of cool that in the editor's column of this, that they were just like, yeah, we screwed up. Here's the actual dates. I thought that was kind of nice. Like,
Yeah.
I think that says a lot about them at that point in time, and it's not something we've seen up to this point. And who knows? Like maybe that will happen again in the future. But yeah, I thought that was just kind of cool. We didn't read the November 1977 issue here on the podcast. We don't have that one, but yeah, I was kind of. I mean, it also goes to show as well. A little bit of a sidetrack here. The Roadside Geology series of books often have an old one and a more modern one. Like maybe it came out in 1985 or whatever, and now there's one being reissued, a modern one for Rockhounding or Roadside Geology of Montana as an example. And in that time period of, let's say, 30 to 40-ish years, so much has changed. We've gotten so much better with our understanding of geological systems, formations, dating, all of this stuff. So it's kind of cool to see some of this stuff being corrected, actively corrected.
Yeah. I thought the Glory Hole was just kind of a bunch of updates.
There's a little bit of a bunch
scattered.
of updates, yeah.
It wasn't really much cohesion or.
It's funny though, talking about the Obsidian Dome, and somebody just sent me a bunch of photos, and they're like, "Do you know what this is?" And it was obsidian from the Obsidian Dome mixed with pumice.
Oh.
And there are pumice mines out there, and there will be like, it almost looks like a little brecciated, but I don't think that's the correct term to be using for it. But basically, pumice and obsidian, not hummus. Mixed together, which I thought was kind of cool. That I'm kind of actively looking up some of the stuff about it, and then we start reading about it.
Well, we won't be reading about it because we missed that issue, but we read a little about it.
Yeah. The Frantic Fumbler was... It almost seems mandatory at this point that come the New Year-ish, December, January, whatever, he talks about his procrastination. And this one, he made a New Year's resolution. Do you remember what his New Year's resolution was?
He was like, I'll get to it. Or something. He had something. He was like, I don't need a... Wait. No, I don't remember. It was a very long-winded
extremely long-winded. His New Year's resolution was to keep his layout scribes sharp.
Right. Uh-huh.
So a layout scribe would be like, it's like an aluminum rod that you sharpen like a pencil and use that for the laying out of your cabochons on slabs. That's just like what people like to do. And he wants to keep those sharp. And I'm like, that's a very low effort, low effort New Year's resolution.
Yes. Yeah. Very timely columns, I guess. They're always January is your New Year's resolution. November, December, talk about making gifts and making things.
Mhm.
I feel like we haven't read. I guess the other columns we've read from Frantic Fumbler were like odd uses for lapidary equipment, but they seem, I don't know. They're all kind of long-winded. I guess it lives up to its name.
Yeah, it's just like
Yes.
like a
Rambly.
yeah, it's a
whatever
little
they
bit of a
want.
rambly mess, and that's what it's intended to be.
Yes.
Did you manage to look up if the United Way is still a thing?
It is, and I'm not really sure what they do. It's a very vague mission statement, and it says, United Way improves lives by mobilizing the caring power of communities around the world to advance the common good. So
That means nothing.
they do good stuff.
Okay. I haven't seen any of their, well, I was going to say I haven't seen any of their little boxes at a register that you can donate, but they don't do those anymore. They're just like, would you like to round up on your
Yeah.
your bill here with the...
I guess some of the things they're doing now are supporting access to mental health services, so supporting an act in Congress, and also supporting, they're like involved in like congressional things. They're like, help get this passed, help get the volunteer income tax assistance program passed.
Sure.
I don't know what that
Okay.
means, but
So they're definitely still active.
still doing various things.
Was the website up to date, or is it
Yeah.
an old timey website?
I mean, it's an organization wanting your money, so it
Yeah.
looked very slick. I'm
Well,
sure they do great things.
That's good. One last column, shop talk. So the shop talk this month was a pretty simple project. Also, I would say it's kind of useful. Some of the stuff that they talk about here, it's a little like not applicable to virtually anybody, but this one is kind of neat. So they basically took a little plastic tray and think like a cat box, square cat litter box, and they took a clear piece of plastic and arched over it so it looks like a little covered wagon type of thing, so that you can do carvings and cleaning and doing all kinds of stuff in with your hands and a rock in this, be able to look down through that arched covered top and not make a mess. It's kind of like a tray to catch water and grinding dust, and it's like a splash lid.
To not
splash
get it
tray lid.
in your face.
Yeah, not get it all over
Yeah.
you and keep things clean. It's like, yeah, I mean, I've seen people build stuff kind of similar to that. And I mean, I don't do any carving or like really polishing or and stuff, like work with the Dremel. I mean, really nowadays it'd be if you're using a Dremel or the Fordham and doing intricate work like that, or maybe even the polishing of silver jewelry.
Did you do that in water?
Depending on what you're doing, like you wouldn't polish with.
Can you use a
would.
Dremel in water?
Yeah, people do that.
Oh.
They'll take like a small fountain pump, and they'll just have it like be a dribble, just to like keep your diamond burr and the stone cool, like not like in water, but
Oh, okay.
yeah, I just thought that was kind of like a real simple thing.
Well,
Like
he said his other idea was you take a fountain pen and you take the ink out and you push water through it.
yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't really get what they was getting
Yeah, I
over
don't.
there.
It was for like having a drip of water, but I didn't. Did it have a pump?
No,
I don't know. I don't really know how fountain pens work. It's just like a tube.
yeah, well, it's like you draw up ink and then you can push ink out. So, I mean, I would imagine that everybody listening to this isn't able to go over to their drawer
Yeah.
of fountain pens. So,
Probably easier to find a little pump than a fountain pen.
yeah, you can go to any pet supply or anywhere and get a little tiny aquarium pump, fountain pump, and it works probably a lot better than your fountain pen.
Yeah. Okay, we're on to the articles, and our first article was gemstone buttons.
So I like the idea of a gemstone button. I
So
think it's
the-
it's like an interesting use for
Yeah,
for
I mean,
basically a cab.
yeah, it's like a button isn't really that far off from a little cab, and why not?
Well, I mean, I'm mostly thinking of like the coats that I grew up with, where it has a zipper and then kind of like a storm flap, and there's like multiple big buttons, like 3/4 inch diameter large buttons.
Yeah.
And this would be like totally applicable to a coat like that, and not so much a shirt, like a
Yeah.
men's shirt. Like the buttons are typically pretty small, but I didn't really care for how they executed it.
Yeah, I agree. So the author had like this custom leather coat, and when he ordered it, the coat maker asked what kind of buttons he wanted, and he was like, I could put rocks on it, so just give me the simplest ones. So he got wooden buttons on his coat, and he made the buttons out of rock, and he decided to glue them directly on top of the wooden buttons.
He should have drilled holes in it and ran the thread through because he glued the stone over the wood button, hiding the thread.
Yeah.
So, like, if they actually came off, like,
I don't. Yeah,
there's no way of re-putting this on.
I was reading. There was the article, but it was also pictures of what he was doing, and I was like, "Oh, how is he gonna drill these little holes in the button?" And I was like, "Oh no, he's just gluing."
Yeah.
I don't know. Is it hard to drill a bunch of little holes and not have the rock break?
I mean, it depends on the rock.
I guess depends
and
on the size of the button.
Yeah, and ultrasonic drills are the way to do it. And they did have them back then. We've seen ads for them.
Yeah.
But there was definitely, it's like a friend, not,
Yeah.
very few people have an ultrasonic drill, even today. Like, people just don't
Yeah.
have them. I know the one that is at our rock club is broken.
Oh,
So it's
from use.
from
All the use it's seen.
poor construction,
Oh.
poor manufacturing practices. I mean, the idea, when it comes to drilling holes, you basically have three options. You have a water core bit, which that's kind of to drill slightly bigger holes than what a lot of people with ultrasonics want to do. Like ultrasonics would be like drilling holes in beads or a button where it's like a tiny, tiny hole, and basically the bit doesn't spin, it vibrates and kind of just like bores a little tiny hole. And then you have a core bit where it's like a water-based, a little drill bit that's hollow, and water actually comes through it, and you drill like a normal drill, like it spins. And then less accurate ways, which are basically using a diamond bit, which that's the only thing I've used. That is the least desirable way to try to drill a hole in rock, but
Seems like it'd be a fun project to make some buttons and useful and a little something you can incorporate into your outfit or your clothing and show off a hobby of yours. And it's not a bolo tie.
yeah, maybe that's something that we should try to do. I'd try to make a couple of buttons.
Yeah.
It'd be fun.
Which, speaking of what was the bolo tie, in the next article? Yes, the next article titled "Always the Hard Way," and it was
Well, always the hard way. There's many methods to learn the basics.
yes, and it was like life lessons from a person into rocks and
There's a few cautionary tales.
cautionary tales, life lessons like don't park in a dry wash when it's cloudy, because the dry wash will not be dry for long.
Yeah, out in the desert, don't.
Yes.
That was kind of a long one where.
Yeah, I was like, what is the point here? He's like, oh, me and my family, we went out to the desert, and my wife kept asking about like the brook or like where's the brook, and I was like, this is the desert. There's no water out here, no water for miles, and We parked in the spot and we got out the grill and the steaks, and my wife went off to look for rocks with our dog, and we were going to cook the steaks, and then my wife came back, and then it started raining, and then the wash filled with water so fast we didn't have time to clean up our little cook spot, and the table and the steaks washed away in the wash.
I feel like you had to hit a minimum word count. I think that's the situation here.
Yes. Took a long time to get to the moral of it.
Yeah, the moral of the story is if you're out in the desert and it's cloudy and it's raining in the distance, well, eventually that rain's going to probably come to you either through rain or the water is going to come to you, because the desert is not an absorbent place.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's sure, yeah, that.
His next life lesson was about, I didn't even understand the moral. He's like, oh, I bought some jade, and I heard it's hard to polish, but I polished it up real good and it looked great. And so my boss's wife wanted me to polish some jade, and I tried to polish it and it wouldn't work. It was just so rough. It would not get shiny.
It kept having an orange peel texture.
Yes. And so I asked my friend, and they told me how to do it.
His mentor.
And lo and behold, that worked.
Yeah.
But I thought the moral of the story was going to be like, oh, that first piece, that wasn't really jade.
I thought that was kind of the angle it was going with, but no, it was actually he was excited and wanting to do a really good job, and he put a new belt on, a new sanding belt, which was on probably like an expandable drum, and didn't break it in and kept undercutting on the stone and creating an orange peel, and it wasn't ever really polishing up. And his mentor was like, you put on a new belt, didn't you? And he went and put on an old belt that was very worn and broken in and didn't experience the undercutting.
Oh, I didn't even catch that.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't even get it.
That was
the advice was like, listen to your mentor or something.
Yes, that was kind of the advice, was like, listen to the person that taught you. But I'm kind of reading between the lines. At no point were they like, oh, like the undercutting, but it was the new belt versus the old belt.
I just thought maybe using an old belt was the trick to polishing jade or something.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are certain stones that will undercut. So
they did not say the word undercut in the article.
That's true. But there are certain stones that have a tendency to undercut, and using well broken in wheels and stuff, like that's a thing. Like, I mean, a lot of lapidaries will save old belts, old discs. Like I have, for my Richardson's high-speed sander, I save usually 2 full sets of old discs. Because sometimes I'll start a new disc maybe, and I'm like, well, that 800 doesn't really look like an 800, because I mean, at least with a silicon carbide sanding disc, that's, let's say, 800 grit, over time, it's of use, it is finer than an 800 grit, if that makes sense, because you're breaking down the embedded grit and taking out all the high points. So yeah, sometimes that's what you need. You need a worn belt and somebody to tell you that.
Yes. And then his last anecdote was about a bolo tie. That's what I mentioned initially, where his bolo tie, all his jewelry was packed away in his suitcase, and he was going to this new rock club dinner, because I guess rock clubs used to have dinner together. And he got all dressed up, and he was like, I need to wear some jewelry to show off to all my new friends. And all he had was this tarnished bolo tie, and he couldn't shine it up, and then he was brushing his teeth, and it struck him. Toothpaste. And he polished up the silver on the bolo tie, and it looked great, and everyone was impressed.
Yes.
I like that article.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a little kind of fluff. Nice light reading.
Yeah, I've used toothpaste to polish headlights before on a vehicle. Yeah, it does work. And apparently, it works for silver too. I didn't know that, but it makes total sense. The next article I actually really liked. I liked the faceting made easy. So, faceting is the process of kind of like real gemstone cutting. Think like when you see a stone in a ring, like, and it's cut
Has a lot of faces on it.
Lots of faces
Yeah.
and facets on it.
Ah.
And it's kind of neat. Like, usually a lot of stones will have a window, and they're all of these things are designed, right? So all of these cut patterns, there's instructions on how to use the machine and replicate these things, and it maximizes the reflective index, and that's kind of the whole idea here. So this article is pretty much like, don't be overwhelmed by this. Like, it's not really like that hard of a thing, but it is a time-consuming thing, and it is an expensive thing. And it does kind of make sense to describe faceting in that manner, because you're only faceting something that is flawless. Like, you're not working with cracked material. It's like perfect material that you most likely purchased, and you're working with the same stuff over and over again, which that gives you the ability to get used to things. And you're following a recipe. It's following a recipe, and it's just very time consuming. And I like that they kind of did some really simple layout of what that looks like. And I have photos of it. Those will be up on the website, currently rockhounding.com/podcast under episode 10, and you can go check those out. But yeah, I mean, faceting can get complex, especially when you're not following a recipe on how to do it, but most people do.
Yeah.
I guess you get to a point where you're making little figurines.
Yeah.
Making figurines,
No.
and you're maybe doing a more free-form faceting. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, I've looked into it. I've looked into what the machines are and go for. I think they are very cool, especially if you have an apartment. If we had an apartment, I would absolutely buy a faceting machine, because
Yeah.
they are very, very quiet, extremely quiet. Like, you can run it in a living room, and
I mean, they're working on such a tiny surface. There's not
and the
giant
the actual
motors and
the actual lap spins fairly slow,
Huh.
so it's not really like spinning at 3,000 RPM and
Yeah.
grinding and water pumps and all of that. Although you do have water for it, it's not the same. It's a whole different beast. It's which I thought it was kind of good. I don't know.
yeah.
It's
I
kinda
liked at the end they had a reference of 6 books to go out and get if you're interested in it.
Do you remember a couple of episodes ago? There was what article was it? I'd have to look it up, but a guy was like, "Oh, I went to somebody's like basement rock sale, and I found that somebody was into faceting there, and
Yeah.
the guy's wife showed the
Uh-huh.
author of this article the guy's stuff, and he was like, it was terrible,
Yeah.
completely awful. He was learning from books. Ugh, books, lame. He didn't say lame. I'm adding the lame part, but he was very like anti-learning from books, and
Yeah.
you can only learn how to facet from a club, from other people. I'm like, well, I don't know.
Oh, was it the same author for this article?
That'd be
I
funny.
mean, they do use kind of the same group of people for writers.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've learned so much from reading books, and that's kind of like my preferred method to learn. And
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. It's funny to see the two kind of perspectives there, I guess. There's a very interesting field trip report. The field trip was Winter Thompsonite. And I definitely liked this
Yeah. It was a
field trip
good
report.
kind of report of their actual trip, and like we did this when we went here and we talked to this person, but also a little bit about the rocks and collecting them, what that's actually like.
So this field trip report, it takes place in Minnesota, and it's like middle of winter, super cold, and a few college kids from the Vermilion Community College Rock Club, which I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, I know.
A community college having a rock club.
Yeah.
That's kind of neat. But I guess, I mean, it makes sense. They have other clubs
Yeah.
for stuff at colleges, right? So they headed to Thompsonite Beach, which is on Lake Superior, and I'm not exactly sure of where this is. If that was like a common name and not necessarily a very specific name, because they give kind of the directions to where they were. And it's on Highway 61, like north of Duluth and like between Duluth and Thunder Bay. There is a actual Thompsonite beach, which is on an island off of the coast, or I guess you call that, like out in the lake. There's that, but I think what they're calling Thompsonite Beach is actually there's a Thompsonite Inn, and it is the beach outside of the inn, because they mentioned staying at the inn, but it's not officially called that. So I was a little confused. I'm like, wait a second.
Yeah, and I think that they described where they went, and it wasn't exactly at the inn.
Yeah.
But it was a little ways. It was like a little bit up from the inn, which now is it's called River State Park, Cascade River State Park. So collecting is not allowed there, but it's like right on the inn is right on the edge. So I'm sure there's still plenty of places to find it.
All around on Lake Superior, though, you can find Thompsonite in some of the vesicles of other rocks, and also like breaking loose, and you're finding the vesicles out there, or the Thompsonite. So Thompsonite is something that I know a decent about, because Thompsonite is in the zeolite group of minerals, and zeolites are basically the best. All other rocks suck. Sorry, everybody. Hopefully you love zeolites.
Really interesting zeolites, unlike stuff that we've not that it's interesting unlike, but it was unlike the stuff we find. It's like little, mostly what we have of zeolites is like white bits.
Yeah, Thompsonite can be like pinks and
it had pinks
yellows,
and oranges, and it was kind of bigger. It was like
Well, so Thompsonite gets misidentified all the time, and I wouldn't be surprised if some of what they were finding was being misidentified. I know of people that go rock hunting, and they get mixed up between the Thompsonite and stellarite. They're both zeolites. The stellarite is in the stilbite subgroup. They're both orthorhombic zeolites, so like the structure they can just look very, very similar, but they're two different things. That said, also in the article they said that there was over 100 varieties of zeolite, which is not over 100 varieties of zeolite found in that area, and that's not really true at all. So there. And saying variety is a weird word, because really, like, there's about like 60 or so zeolites if you exclude slight variation to it, like Thompsonite and Thompsonite CA and other ones that have like, it's still Thompsonite, but there's slight structural or chemical differences to them, but it's still basically Thompsonite for those that don't want to like super nerd out about the zeolite group. But yeah, so when they said like varieties, I'm like, do you mean Thompsonite that is orange over here and Thompsonite that is pinkish over here? Is that like what they were considering a variation of the same thing?
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know either. But yeah, I mean, it was kind of cool. Like, there's some great photos in it, and yeah, they're just like out there in the middle of winter.
Yeah.
Having at it, like looking for Thompsonite, which that's kind of cool.
They were right on where the lake meets the snow, so because that was only
meets the ice.
Yeah, the ice, because that's the only thing that's not covered in snow, because it's been melted by the lake coming up at it.
Mm-hmm. Hey, I would want to, if we're ever out on Lake Superior, out by Duluth and Thunder Bay, I want some Thompsonite. Like, I've seen some like good golf ball sized chunks like floating around out there.
It's big.
Yeah, and I mean, it makes sense. Like, a lot of it is, I think that whole area is like glacial till, like that the whole Great Lakes, it's all glacial till, and that's why you have such like weird varieties of stuff, because like the ice lobes came down from Canada and ground stuff up on their way down, and then on their way back as they receded. I think that's the geology of that. Don't hold me to that one.
This magazine was a little different than previous ones, it had this art at the beginning of this article. It was the first of 30 glossy pages. In the previous issues, I think there's been glossy pages here and there.
Yeah.
But this one had 30 straight glossy pages, so that's why there was such nice photos accompanying this article, because they had full page, color, glossy.
At some point in 1977, I guess Rock and Gem started rolling in the money.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, 7 full pages of the 30 were ads.
Yeah.
So they're like, oh, wait, you want a glossy page ad? Sure. Let's just pay for those glossy pages and then some.
It's definitely a very ad. I mean, we've said this before. It's a very ad-heavy magazine. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's how you make money in magazines, right? I mean, it's the ads. That's why this magazine costs 75 cents. There's so many ads for their item list and give them 75 cents for their catalog of rocks they sell.
Yeah.
So,
Man, I gotta admit, I'm super curious to crack open a new Rock and Gem and be like, are they still selling catalogs? Like, can you still buy a catalog? Like, can I get a printed Diamond Pacific catalog? Maybe.
you probably don't have to pay for it.
I don't know. We're gonna find out at some point once we work through all of our issues.
Yes.
So the next 2 articles, I'm going to say 2. They're kind of one, and it's the Lapidaries Seen in Stones, and it's like the 2 guys that share a shop, and one guy does stone carving, and then the other guy does silversmithing, and they kind of collaborate on different projects. So although it's technically 2 articles, I think maybe we'll just lump them in together.
It was
here.
the lapidary scenes in stone and also the silversmith's artistry in metal.
Yeah, so I liked these. I thought the carving was probably better than a lot of the carvings that we've seen. Is more intricate for the size, and they were kind of making like a medallion.
Yeah, it was kind of big.
Yeah, it was pretty big.
It was like a...
So the articles, they're more like artist profiles, like...
And they kind of like walk you through the project they're doing, and it's not like a how-to, it's just like how this person's doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I thought that was kind of interesting. I mean, it's pretty stuff, and, I know of husband and wife like teams today that collaborate in their jewelry making and things like that. But I don't really know of anybody kind of outside of like, I don't know. I don't know of anybody that's like shares a shop with somebody they're not related to.
Yeah, I don't know.
Which I thought that was kind of cool. Like, pretty simple. The carver, his name was Slim White, and I actually managed to find some of his other stuff that he had carved, like photos of, and like top tier carving as far as my eyes go, being that I don't know anything about carving, but I feel like I've seen a lot of bad carvings. So, it was good. And his partner, Terry, and he did all the silversmithing. And silversmithing is a very cool, like, I don't know, it's like a side hobby almost. Not a side hobby, that's not the way to say that.
It's a whole thing in and of itself.
Yeah, it's,
I mean,
you can be into silversmithing and not do any like stonework whatsoever. It can be, it's a whole hobby in and of itself.
Well, the guy, Terry, he majored in metalsmithing. He had said he had a Bachelor of Fine Arts concentration or major in metalsmithing, which I didn't. I looked up, and you can still get a degree in metalsmithing. You can get one from Central Washington University.
Really?
Yeah,
I
like
didn't know that.
a bunch of places.
That's cool.
Yeah. Next, we had another field trip report.
Yes.
Petrified algae at Oregon Buttes.
Not in Oregon.
Yes. So disappointing.
It makes sense that you'd have Oregon Butte in Wyoming, right?
I don't know. What's the history of the word Oregon? I don't know.
That's a good question.
We should know that, I
yeah.
feel like. I don't even know. I know Washington and Idaho.
Well, I don't think they did a very good job of describing the material.
No, they really didn't. There was a picture, but it was kind of dark.
Yeah, you couldn't really.
It was like a dark brown, black rock on like a dark brown background.
And so here's their description of this material that they went out to go hunt down. Much of the agatized algae has been formed around silicafied branches or limbs buried in an early lake.
Yeah, and that was like way towards the end of the article. Like I kept, because they talk about the history of the area, like, oh, the wagon trains came through, and yeah, and then the first women came through it in this year, and then the people who would become the Donner Party came. Then like
it was off of the immigrant trail.
Yeah, okay.
And the immigrant trail that has such like a long history of. Well, I mean, hopefully people listening know what the Donner Party was. But there's other wagon trains that got like lost and totally had a horrible, horrible go of it, and people died, and it was.
Which, it's interesting to mention that it's on that trail, but they really went into the history of that a little more than probably was necessary. I would have liked more information about the rock.
Yeah, well,
how it got there, where it's from.
I've managed to find some photos of the material, and because this isn't something that I'm familiar with, and it kind of sucks. It's not that great.
Well, it's like, how is it petrified algae? Because algae is just like a very small thing, right?
Yeah.
It's like pond scum.
Yeah, it's Well, it's basically petrified pond scum, and I mean. And silicates have moved in, so you have what, from the observer, looks like a brown jasper. It kind of looks like a brown jasper with black speckles in it. So that's kind of what it looks like.
Did you see any pictures of what it looks like rough?
Yeah, it just looks like a brown rock.
It's just like a rock?
Yeah, just like like you would probably not think to pick this up.
Because the photo was tumbled bits, which was, so I didn't.
Yeah.
If we went out there, I wouldn't know what we're looking for, because there's all these little rounded, polished bits.
Yeah, but everybody loves a polished rock, but generally speaking, from the perspective of showing somebody, like, on a field trip report where you have like a map and you're trying to describe this locality, having the tumbled material as the only color example is a poor way to do it, because obviously not everything out there is tumbled and polished.
Yeah. In a similar way, if you have a guide on finding rocks somewhere, the best photo of the material is not something that was the best piece ever found that's in a museum right now. That is not helpful for the average person going to that spot, especially if it's like a polished slab. Not helpful.
So here's the thing, everybody. We live in Northeast Washington, and we've been to the Rice Museum. And the Rice Museum is outside of Hillsboro, Oregon. So like Northwest Oregon. And it is amazing.
Yeah.
The Rice Museum, top tier place. If you're ever in that area, go check it out. The problem is, in a lot of the rockhounding guidebooks that we have for our states, they went to the Rice Museum and used those museum-grade examples
with the listings.
With the listing for where you go rockhound. So technically, I mean, sure, if you're that's like going and looking at the very, very best from anywhere. Like, I mean, how about the giant amethyst scepters that have been pulled out of Hanson Creek here in Washington? That's not that is
not
the
representative.
That is the exception and not the rule.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, show what the average person's going to get with a reasonable amount of time.
Yeah.
The next article that we have is the techniques of acid etching. and this is not something I know a whole lot about, but it's acid etching silver. So like silver jewelry, where you can have a pattern and basically just etch it into the silver. I mean, I understand the process a little bit. I know of electro etching for modern day steels. So that's kind of like most of my etching knowledge, but it's a little similar, except electricity.
Yes.
So basically, this article is talking about etching a design into your silver using nitric acid, and a lot of it. A lot can be done with the process of etching. Just the different like designs, all of that stuff. Like I don't really have a whole lot that I can actually comment on about the use of like nitric acid for your acid etching of silver. But I do think it's always interesting that every time I ever see a video or read any single thing about acid, they always want to talk about safe acid handling procedures, and they're always like,
Sure.
yeah, but it's a little safety Sally-ish. I'm like,
What did it say in this article?
well, so generally speaking, doesn't matter if it's nitric acid or whatever, that you should be adding acid
Oh, right.
to water and not water to acid.
Yeah.
And the idea is that you don't want to create a situation where it will boil over the vessel, right?
Yeah.
But I'm also like, you know what? Like playing with acid is fun, right? Like it's fun, like, and that. So it's kind of neat to just mess around with muriatics and hydrochlorics and different things. And
So is the nitric acid like a powder?
you can buy it in a powder form or a liquid form. And
Because I mean, if you're adding
they didn't.
water to a liquid, is it still heating up and boiling and splashing?
Yeah.
Yes, that's bad.
Yeah.
I mean, that is, you don't want acid splashing on you.
I mean, look, like the first time I put my hand in muriatic acid without a glove, it didn't feel good. And I learned. And now I don't do that.
Well, at least
You can play with all
the first time you learned wasn't when it splashed on your face and you had terrible acid burns.
Yeah, maybe do as they say and do, and not do as I say.
Maybe.
Yeah, well, realistically, like nitric acid for acid etching, it's like a pretty not super dangerous acid. Like there's acids that can melt through you and go through the floor and keep going. So nitric acid, muriatic acid, they're not that. Hydrochloric's not even really that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. It's kind of neat to see like the process of removing silver.
Yeah. I don't know if people do that still now. I feel like.
I don't know.
No.
Yeah, I'm not
I
sure.
don't know.
That's a good question.
Is silver jewelry still popular?
I think silver jewelry is very popular right now, more popular than gold.
Like the kind of jewelry where she was making like a big chunky bracelet. Like a, I don't know how to describe it, but.
Yeah, I definitely
see
think that
those.
stuff is popular. There's still people silversmithing, and yeah, no, that's definitely still a thing. On the last episode, we speculated at the very end about the art of many horses.
Well,
And
the cover says jewelry of many horses.
Oh, the jewelry of many
And
horses.
the article is the art of many horses.
So
The
I was
art
like,
is jewelry.
I was like, is this jewelry made by horses, of
No.
horses, or for horses? And I was wrong on all three accounts.
No.
So I don't know how I feel about this. This is an article about a shop in Los Angeles
Yeah.
called Many Horses.
Yes.
And they sell, it was hard for me to actually figure out what this is exactly. If they sell Native American themed art and jewelry, or if it's actually like made by Native Americans. I feel like it's stuff that's just like themed.
I think
I think it's themed. It's like you can
Because it wasn't run by Native American guys.
No,
It was just two random guys.
Yeah, two random guys
It was
that were
like
into Native
It
American
was like
stuff.
a English a high school history teacher and a
Yeah.
high school art teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then they also did tours.
Yeah, one of the guys, he contacted a travel agent, was like, I'll take people on tours, this much per person, this many days, and you went out and learned about Native Americans from the sky, and he showed you sites in the Southwest and transported you and planned it and guided a tour.
Yeah, so you could buy your knockoff Native American jewelry and art, and then he would take your money and take you around to Native American places.
So very on topic for Rock and Gem.
I would prefer if this was an article about a horse making making jewelry. Be like, it's Mr. Ed's first cabochon.
Yeah, I mean, you could probably get a horse to hold something in its mouth, and I don't know.
At the very
I'm
least,
not sure if a horse could make jewelry.
At the very least, you could put some peanut butter in the horse's mouth and make them move their mouth around a lot and make it look like they're talking for a television show. I watched way too much Mr. Ed.
The next article was also about a place, called Mineral Mecca, the American Museum of Natural History's Gem and Mineral Hall.
Yeah.
I thought it sounded pretty interesting.
Yeah.
It was just they were redoing their mineral exhibit at the museum because they're like
in New York.
Yeah, New York Museum of Natural History.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I like that they were really critical of having meteorites at the entrance.
Yeah, they're like,
ugh,
it was
meteorites,
lame.
not the best.
Yeah, they didn't like that. Most of it was a very glowing review.
Yeah, they described a bunch of the mineral displays, and I mean, obviously, you would hope that it would be really good for a museum of that caliber to be able to either buy stuff or get donations.
Yeah.
There's one thing that they didn't touch on, but I think it's important in most everybody, at least at some point in their rockhounding or lapidary, hobby, whatever you want to call this, they get into identification. And one of the cool things about a museum like Rice Museum or this museum is having stuff that is properly identified and labeled, and to be able to go put your eyes on it, which is really cool. But like we were saying, with Rockhounding guidebooks, they will have museum grade stuff, being that it's a museum. One thing I found interesting though is displays of rocks that are not museum grade but still fully identified, and there's a lot of value to be had in that as far as being able to just identify rocks. One place that comes to mind for me is north of us in Colville at the courthouse. There is a display of all of the rocks that you can find within the county, Stevens County, which I think is really cool. Having displays and museums, I would love to go to a museum like this and just have the knowledge of looking at these specimens and be like, okay, so that's that specimen. This is the name. I'm going to laser etch that into my mind. Usually, this article, they were talking about how cool these pieces are, as opposed to, wow, you can learn so much from going to these. If you kind of read between the lines a little bit in it, but yeah, I mean, you can learn so much about the identification process, I think.
Yeah.
So I thought that was kind of cool.
It said there was a bunch of different displays on different types of rock, not varieties of rock. It said, for those interested in radioactive, fluorescent, minerals affected by electricity, and so on, there is a section on that subject. Mm-hmm. What's a mineral affected by electricity?
You can apply electrical charges to some rocks and they will glow.
Oh.
Yeah. I can't
I've
think of the
never-
name.
never
I can't
seen
think
that.
Of, I can't think of the name right now. So when you take a UV light and you aim it at like a rock and it changes color or appears to change color, the fluorescence, phosphorescence of like the afterglowing effects, that is, you're taking an ultraviolet light, exciting electrons, they're changing their orbit and bouncing back a different spectrum of light. And then the phosphorescence is as those electrons drop back down into their standard orbit, that's that like glow that's reducing. Similarly, when you apply electricity to certain minerals, they will cause their electrons to change orbit.
Huh.
So,
Okay.
yeah. I'm going to, after this podcast, I'm going to take my extra car battery and a pair of jumper cables, and we're going to test everything in the shop.
First, we should go to the museum and look at the display.
If we film this, though, it will be electrifying content.
Ooh.
Oh! Well, I think that about wraps it up for this episode of the Previously Rockhounding podcast. In the next episode, we will be looking at Rock and Gem magazine from April 1977. It is the 1977 Rockhound and Lapidary guidebook. We have new finds in minerals, Lapidary of the Year, Rockhound wheels, cabochons, inlays, field trips.
Rockhound wheels.
Yes.
Like a wheel for your vehicle?
Super awesome rides, cars, trucks for the Rockhound.
Yeah.
It's also a really thick issue. 115 pages versus 91. Next time!